Hello, welcome to Friday morning at about 10 o'clock, when it is time to do stuff with Dice and Dungeons. And by doing stuff, I mean putting these little bits here together. Hopefully, it'll work. On Wednesday, I test fit all these parts, these bits here and these bits here. Not, well, this too, actually. To see, to get them to all come together so that the pins went into the openings and things like that. And that, that kind of went okay one part at a time. But today, they all need to, on both sides, come together in a cohesive way. So we will find out together. We will be finding out together whether or not that effort will be successful. I'm going to be using contact cement, not regular cement, and I'm not going to be following the directions exactly because it says, attach one part and wait for the cement to set and then attach another part. But the way these parts are put together, if, for example, this, okay, the lower A arm just attaches here, right there to the bulkhead, right? And if that doesn't line up, it attaches there and there. But if it doesn't line up right, then there's then the rest of it won't fit. Okay. And so what I'm going to attempt to do with the contact cement is get all four of these bits attached to the axle and to the vehicle, the chassis, at one time, so that they can all be aligned, that they can fit and be aligned. And find out if that works. The thing about there's two things about the contact cement, three things. Among the things that the contact cement does is, one, it allows, after the contact is made, it still allows some movement. It doesn't grab immediately like CA glue does. So I've got some time to make some adjustments if something doesn't fit perfectly the first go. The other is that it will adhere even to a painted surface. Okay, and there are some of those here. And the third is that once it's applied to the places where it needs to get applied, okay, once that's done, I've got 2 hours to put the parts together. It just sits there waiting to come in contact with other contact cement. So I can apply it to all of the contact points on the suspension, and then start, and I have time to get them together. So we'll give that a go during this stream. The other things I'm going to do is I'm going to put a second coat of aluminum paint on the inside here, especially back here, okay, where this is going to show. And yeah, it's actually a good thing I painted it first, as I'm feeling this now. And those will show a little bit. There's just some flaws. See, this is, I can rub my finger across and that's smooth. I rub my finger across here and there's bits of plastic that are sticking out that need to come down. So this will have to be sanded off and then repainted anyway. Yep, I didn't detect that the first time around. So I might need even more touch up after that. I'm going to unclamp this to see if the wheels held together. And if they did, yay, I'll do another one. Wires. Why is this so seriously clamped? Because the tires, the rubber part of the tires, is wide. Is wider than the wheels, and the wheels need to be cemented together. The two halves, the two parts need to be cemented together, otherwise they don't fit on the car. So I'm going to undo this and see if it worked. And then there are other things, lots of other things to be done if, in fact, all of this goes together well and quickly, which it may or may not do. Don't know. But if it does, then there's lots of other stuff to do that will use up the time. So what I'm going to do first, though, is take care of this little problem down here, which, yeah, just hadn't noticed before. And then I'll just go ahead and paint it, I think. I think for an 800. Yeah, I need to take these off. I decided against trifocals because I can't. There's this tiny little spot in the bottom of the trifocal that focuses up close. And I'd be trying to do this, and I can't do that very well. So I can see up close without glasses. Not extremely well, but a lot better than I can see at a slightly larger distance. By up close, I mean like within 18 inches. And if it's further away than that, then it starts getting really fuzzy. Oh, wow. Yeah, stop talking already. Since I'm working on this Lotus-Ford, maybe, if I get some sort of monologue going at all here today, I probably should be about cars, right? So experience with cars. I think it's okay to talk about, as long as it's like real life, I can talk about specific brands and so on. So I can talk about our first car. They're actually kind of amusing stories. So we bought our first car. My wife's parents father, really. It was actually it was a pretty decent car, except for certain things. It was a 65 Ford Galaxy. And um, We don't know the full story behind it. Okay. We bought it. It was quite used by the time we bought it. We bought it in 1971, I think. So it was a fairly old car already. But the reason we were able to afford it is they were selling it cheaply because apparently it started on fire. I mean, it's not like the whole car burned, right? That if that had happened, we wouldn't have been able to do anything with it because it would have been a burned out Hulk. It was just an engine fire, the carburetor. It's quickly extinguished, but it did damage the engine some. So what happened was that it went to the local high school shop. They had an automotive shop there to train people how to work on cars because a lot of people in the area ended up getting jobs in the factories. Okay, so they had like a complete auto repair shop there in the high school. And what they did was they rebuilt the engine. That was their project for the semester, is to take the engine out and take it all apart and rebuild it. So they, put rings on it and on the pistons and reset the pistons and put new spark plugs in. Just, all the stuff that one would expect would happen if you rebuilt an engine in a high school. And it was all inspected by the teacher, right? So the work was, done. But so this car had an engine fire in the carburetor. And then the engine was rebuilt by a high school auto mechanics class as their class project. And then we bought it because, we were given a pretty good deal. I think. I don't know. Really, we didn't do any research. So I don't know if we got a really good deal on a 6-year-old once on fire rebuilt by a high school class. Price or not. I mean, thinking back at it, I really have no idea whether we got a good deal or not. But we bought it anyway. And it was a really handy thing to have, a car back in 1971. And it seemed to drive okay. But the brakes were making this weird noise. It was one of the wheels was making this weird noise. And it's like this whoosh, 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 kind of shooping noise. It's kind of a shooping noise is what it was. It happened at low speeds, and it was related to, linked to the rotational speed of the wheel. So as the car went faster, the shooping noise, to be real precise about it, got louder and faster. And then once you're up to 30 miles an hour or so, it just stopped. There wasn't any noise anymore. And then when we slowed down, it came back again. So it was, what's all this about? So we took it to a mechanic, and they took the wheel off. And what it was that a piece of metal had been left inside the brake drum. So it was an indication that maybe maybe the work done by the shop, the high school shop, wasn't perfect, but it was an easy fix. It was like just got a piece of metal flopping around inside your brakes. And once that was out, then the noise stopped. So that was, you know, at the time we were pretty young and didn't have a lot of money. It was like, well, yeah, we didn't really want to spend a lot of money on this, but now we did, and it's working, so fine. And then not too long later, the oil light came on, and it's an oil pressure warning, really. We checked the oil, and it was down like 2 quarts. Half the oil had disappeared. So we put more oil in it, and then checked it again, and it just kept losing oil. Not real fast. I mean, it wasn't like all the oil ran out in a day. It took a while. But then we took a highway trip, and that turned out to be quite an adventure, because the as we went faster, the oil leaked out faster, and we put more oil in and actually took it in and said, had it checked, and it was the oil pan. The oil is distributed in the vehicle passively. So there's it's called an oil pan. It's just a tub, kind of. It's basically a tub where the oil sits, and as the camshaft spins around, part under the pistons drive this thing, and then the oil just splashes around and lubricates everything. Yeah, the oil pan gasket, the seal between the 2 pieces of metal, the pan is metal, it goes up against metal, there's a gasket in between. It was loose, and so it was leaking oil, just spattering out. So they just tightened it up, thinking, well, that should fix the problem. Well, it didn't. It still kept leaking oil, because I think when they tightened the gasket up, they broke the gasket, probably. But they tore it somehow. So we were taking a drive, and we're like 150 miles, and the oil ran out, and the engine essentially broke. Something on one of the pistons, like a piston rod maybe, or one of the connectors, or some of the valves or something. It started making this horrible clattering noise, and it just didn't go anywhere. So it was quite a to-do, getting a ride back to a place where we could be, and getting the thing towed back. It went back to the same high school shop where they rebuilt the engine again, or at least repaired it. But and it didn't leak oil after that, at least not any more than any other car of that age did. And they all did, really. It's another story. All of these cars back in the 50s and 60s and early 70s, they were just dripping stuff all the time. Engine oil, engine coolant, transmission fluid, brake fluid, power steering fluid, all sorts of things. And the gaskets just, the materials for the gaskets just aren't what they are now. They got hard and brittle, and they cracked. And if they weren't replaced all the time, which was not an easy thing to do, they just started dripping little bits. Well, that pretty much stopped after it was rebuilt the second time. But one of the 8 cylinders just never worked after that. So it was pretty much a V7 instead of a V8. Had mechanics look at it. They couldn't, there was nothing that could be done about it at a reasonable cost. And so it wasn't. So it just ran for several years on 7 cylinders. That wasn't really the annoying part about it. The annoying part about it was I need to get the other box of stuff here, was that the carburetor never worked. And nowadays, you talk to people and you go, carburetor? What in the heck is a carburetor? Why is there a carburetor? What does it do? Well, now you have fuel injection, and the air and the gasoline are mixed very, computer controlled. Very precise computer controlled valves, and then the air fuel mixture is pushed. It's called fuel injection. It's pushed into the cylinders. Well, before that, they had carburetors, and it was a more passive thing that was driven by a vacuum in the engine that essentially pulled the air fuel mixture, sucked it into the engine. I'm taking these off and hoping that I now have a wheel that works. This is the left one. It is supposed to go on here like this. And it does. Yay. So I'll do another one. So I'm messing with this. I might as well do it now. I should learn my lesson to not have. I just had this out. This is the thing I'll be working on later. But now I'm going to be messing around with model cement, and it's a good chance of making a mess of things, which I don't want to do. I'm going to do the same thing to this that I did to the other one, which is put a bunch of model cement on here and a bunch on here, and then hope they stick together. But first, I almost screwed up. I need to get the paint off. I need to take this out and sand down those bits where the model cement will be contacting the model cement. I just shove things aside in a not terribly well. Oh, good. Hi, spider. Go eek a spider. No, don't go eek a spider. Spiders are fine. They get rid of other things. They eat things that you don't want. Okay. I need to sand off the paint and the chrome plating until it's down to the raw plastic. So I'm not an engineer or auto mechanic person or anything like that, but I learned about carburetors, and what happens is that with a carburetor, the air comes in through the top past what's called a butterfly valve, which is just a flap valve. It just like flaps like that, opens up, closes. opens up, closes. And that determines the air-fuel mixture. Okay, so the air that comes in, if the valve is closed, less air comes in. And if it's open, more air comes in. And that determines the air-fuel mixture, which needs to vary. Like it needs to be richer, depending on the temperature of the air and the temperature of the engine and the speed at which the engine is running. That valve opens and closes to change the air mixture. And it wasn't computer controlled. There weren't any sensors, so to speak. There was a spring that sprung differently depending on the temperature. I guess there's no other, that's probably the best way to say it, is that it held things tighter or looser depending on the temperature of the air in the engine. Well, that never worked. Okay. It's called an automatic choke. And when you start an engine, if you have a manual choke, and a manual choke consisted pretty much of just a lever inside the driver's compartment. There's a lever, and that pulled a cable that opened or closed that valve. And in general terms, when you're starting an engine, you choke it. And it's called a choke because that's kind of what happens, is it closes the valve to reduce the air that comes into the engine. It chokes off the air. Clever, huh? Well, this was a modern car, and it didn't have this little cable that did that to the carburetor butterfly valve. It was supposed to do it automatically. It was an automatic choke, which means that it was supposed to just do it on its own based on this spring that was temperature sensitive. That never worked. In fact, over time, I'm not sure that any of them ever worked because we put 3 carburetors on this thing. It's like, this carburetor isn't working well. We'll just put a rebuilt one on, and that's what they did 3 times, and they all had exactly the same problem. So what we actually should have done is that we should have had some mechanic who just, was willing to do unorthodox things, should have put in a manual choke. What we should have done is just had, instead of this spring that never worked, controlling how open or closed the valve was, that never worked. We should have just had a cable attached to it, run through the firewall. That's something they don't like to do. You don't want to puncture the firewall necessarily, and just had a handle put in the driver's compartment so that we would have a manual choke, just like in cars that had manual chokes, right? We never did that. So what we'd have to do is, to start the car, is open the hood, take off the air cleaner, manually adjust the butterfly valve, close it all back up again, get the car started, let it warm up a little bit, reverse the process. I can't believe we kept doing that. We did that for years. Yeah. It was not, there were some things about this car that were less than wonderful. So we didn't do what we should have done, which was to put a manual choke in, which probably could have been done. Somebody somewhere would have been willing to do that. Some sort of aftermarket modification. So that was kind of an interesting experience with that car. And then every once in a while, because the carburetor didn't work, it would just stop. It would stall especially if it was really cold out. That's really when you want to be opening the hood and taking off the air cleaner and messing around with the butterfly valve to manually adjust it, is when it's cold. But that's when it happened. But we were young and resilient and put up with it many years. I think eventually we kept that thing until we get it when it's like 6 or 7 years old. I think it was 11 or 12 when we finally got rid of it. What started to happen was that, we're up in the upper Midwest, and there's snow and ice and a lot of salt put down to take care of the snow and the ice, and just like cars at the time, this was one of them. It started to rust. The rusting got pretty significant. The fenders, the inside of the fenders, and the wheel wells, the bottoms of the doors, places where water and things like that can accumulate. So it got pretty rusty. You will hear stories, and these are all true, that cars of the era, it was not totally unusual, okay, for the floor of the car to get rusty and to rust out. And what you'd end up with is, and this is true, it happened to my brother and other people we knew, so that this did happen. When you were young and poor and couldn't afford a new car or even a used one, and they kept running, the car kept running, so that wasn't a problem. It was just that it rusted out. Is that you could see the road from the inside of the car, because the floor would rust out, and you just needed to be careful not to step in the hole. It wasn't always wasn't always pleasant, because sometimes it would rain and the water would get up inside the car. It was hard to heat in the winter because, there was a hole in the floor. Ours didn't do that. It never got to the point where we had the floor rust out, but the trunk did. The rear fenders, rust out, and the trunk did. And the jack fell out one day from, I heard this clattering, and it rolled out through the hole in the floor of the trunk, not in the passenger compartment, but in the trunk. So that was kind of that was a situation. There probably is a little bit of danger in that because it was not closed up, that carbon monoxide from the exhaust could get into the trunk, and potentially, even though there was a seat between the trunk and the vehicle, potentially could get into passenger compartment of the car, but we didn't die of carbon monoxide poisoning, but we did lose some objects from the trunk that way. We had to be really careful what was in there and what was packed. Now, you might even ask, and this is a legitimate thing to ask, what do you mean the jack fell out? This is a jack thing, and why was it in the trunk? Well, this is another thing you don't have much anymore, is cars came with spare tires. There was a fifth wheel and a fifth tire in every car, because sometimes a tire would blow out. You'd get a puncture or or the tread would tear or something like that, and the tire would go flat, and you could lift the car up on this thing called a jack. Okay, talk a little bit about that in a bit. So you could jack up the car, take the bad tire off, put the new tire on, not just the tire, the whole wheel. Replace the whole thing, the wheel and the tire. It was a unit. And then be on your way. It's bad. Sorry, the wheel slipped and it got cement on the side of the tire. And now I've got a messed up tire here. So yeah, and that was a thing that up until fairly recently you could get cars that had spare tires. Back then, the wheel and the tire were full size, and I need to emphasize that the wheel and the tire were that the spare that was in your trunk was the same as the other four that were actually right on the car. And then I think in the later 70s, they came out with the reduced size spare. It was like a little miniature wheel. The miniature tire, the wheel was full-sized. Okay. The wheel had to be full-size because they had to go onto the car. Okay. It had to fit. But the tire was little. I mean, really tiny. Probably like half or even less the size in diameter of the regular tire. Hopefully this will come together. Fortunately, the cement I got on the tire is on the back, and it's not going to show very much, I think. But that was just things that happens. It slid. I didn't have a good grip on it. I was trying to push it down, and I pushed it sideways a little bit. Hopefully, this same sort of oopsiness isn't going to happen as I attempt to assemble the rear suspension on the car. I'm going to do the left side first because the parts are smaller because of the asymmetry. It's supposed to go on. This thing here is the rear axle. This is not, didn't have a solid axle. It had independent suspension in the back, like it does in the front. I don't know why they're doing it this way. I don't know why I have a metal axle. I really don't. Not entirely sure why they decided to put that into the model, but so it is. Okay, so every place there's a little pin, like there and there and there and there and there. Those all get a dab of contact cement, and every place there's an opening like that and that and there and here. Okay, all of those spots. Those that get contact cement on the inside. Just put those far, far away. I need this to tell me where the parts are supposed to go. It's interesting. There's a thing right there that looks like something is supposed to go in that. I mean, it really does. It looks like something's supposed to be inserted on there. And I don't know what that is. In fact, I'm I'm now bothered by that. It attaches here. Spring attaches there. This is where it attaches to the car. The upper A arm goes here. This is almost like it's for a different car, but I think that's part of this. Is the brake pad here. This is for. It looks like one of those things that isn't supposed to be there. Okay, like it was molded in for a different vehicle. It just isn't supposed to be there at all. There was the same thing was true here, like right here. There was a pin that looked like it was supposed to go into something. Like it was supposed to, like there was supposed to be a hole here where that attached. Okay. But there isn't. And I think the same thing is happening here. And I'm need to take the time to do that, but I think I need to take those off. Because if these are brakes, if these are brake pads, then that makes no sense at all. Why that would be there. And it's very visible. It hangs out right at the back of the. Okay, I'm going to make triple sure that there's nothing, that there is no reason for that to be there. Okay. Well, this whole thing is now going to be delayed. It's going to be delayed while I fix that. And I'm just seeing more and more flaws on this piece. But what I'm going to be doing, you're going to be saying, what the heck, is that this bit here, okay, that looks like something's supposed to go into it, isn't supposed to be there at all. It's just not supposed to be there. And when I look at the pictures, okay, it's interesting. So when I look at this picture, there was a prong there, and it's not on the pictures, so I took that off. When I look at the pictures of these parts, you can see it here, and you can see it here, okay? There is no thing hanging out. There just isn't. There's nothing there. So the part was made for a different vehicle or something. And I just need to fix it. Even though this is going to take more time, it might, instead of getting this done today, it might be done, I don't know, it may end up being done on Monday, we'll see. But this whole thing here needs to not be here. And I've triple checked it over and over and over, and nothing attaches to that. And it is just absolutely wrong. It shouldn't take too long. And then I'm going to touch up the paint, sand it down, and then touch up the paint, and then go back to assembly. What time is it? It's not quite 11 yet. I've got 2 hours. I should still be able to make an effort to get these parts put together. It won't take too long to repaint that. So this is the second time the rear suspension that there's just that the part was clearly made for a different model, and they just repurposed it. Well, yeah, so this 1965 Ford Galaxy, which, you know, it was Yeah, it was an okay car, except for the parts that didn't work. Like the carburetor never worked, and one of the 8 cylinders just never worked. Okay, but it kept going for a really good long time. Hi, Enforcer. Thanks for joining in. Stuff happens. You got to deal with it. It's just like stuff is happening today. As I'm getting close to assembling the parts, I'm seeing that they're wrong. That there's something wrong with the parts, and I needed to take some time to change them, to manipulate them. So I had to file some bits on here that were not supposed to be here, and now I need to touch up the paint. And after I touch up the paint, then I will let it dry. I'm going to watch paint dry for a bit, and while I'm letting that paint dry, I will do something else, I guess. I also attempt to not splash that all over. So I got to talk about carburetors a little bit. Not a lot, but carburetors. This is kind of an interesting thing too. The last place that carburetors were routinely used on a vehicle, a car, was, believe it or not, and you should believe it because this is true, the last place that they were routinely used was NASCAR Cup. At that point, it was the Winston Cup, because they still let cigarette manufacturers sponsor. It's darker than, well, maybe not. It's the same shade. So yeah, it's interesting. Almost every passenger vehicle had gone to fuel injection, but NASCAR was still using carburetors, and they didn't go to fuel injection until seriously, it was an extreme rarity to have a carburetor still on a production vehicle. But our 65 Ford Galaxy had a carburetor, and as I said, it never worked. We had 3 of them put on, and all of them had the same problem. The automatic choke did not work. It didn't choke when it was supposed to, and it didn't open up when it was supposed to. We should have jerry-rigged a manual choke by running a cable from the carburetor valve. We should have done that into the passenger compartment, but we didn't. And so we just lived with it, especially my wife, who had to deal with it sometimes really early in the mornings in the winter. It was very unfair to her, I have to say, to have that going on. But that isn't what eventually killed the car. What eventually killed the car was the rust. And as I said, we didn't, unlike some, and this is a true thing, unlike some people who were driving cars with the floorboards rusted out so that you could see the road from the inside of the car. Ours never rusted there. The trunk rusted. Okay, the jack fell out. Oh, yeah, the tail lights. Hi. That's right, you don't. Well, we learned a lot about cars having the 65 Ford Galaxy because there was a lot of things that could be fixed on a car. As we used to say, if you had a screwdriver and a wrench, you could fix almost anything, and that was kind of true. Did it ourselves. We replaced the fan belt, replaced the entire water pump. That was something. It was fun, crawling around and reaching around on the inside of the engine compartment, taking out the old water pump and basically loosening the belt, bolting the pump on. Did this in the alley behind my parents' house. They lived in an older neighborhood that still had alleys. That was kind of fun. So it was just in the alley out there. Took the better part of a half a day, I think. Needed to relax after that. And it was quite a chore. But it worked. We kept the car going. We replaced the radiator once. Everything on these cars, just rusted out. So the radiator core, went rotten after a while because this thing was built in 1964. It was a 65 model, and it kept going for over 10 years, which was pretty unusual then. But not among people we knew who were all students, and we didn't have any money. And if we had a car, we just kept it running forever and ever and ever, as long as it kept moving, basically. So the other thing about this, one of the very few times, I think one of the twice in my life when I've been pulled over by the police, happened because the taillight, let's just say this, the taillights, this just didn't work. Can't believe it. I can't even get the paint on right today. The wires for the taillights just ran through the trunk. And the taillights themselves just went into sockets that you could push in from inside the trunk. So you just open the trunk, followed the wire, and the taillights went into a socket. Okay. Well, if you put stuff into the trunk, like you usually would, right? I mean, that's what it's there for, is to put stuff into it. It would sometimes catch on the wires and pull the taillights off, the light bulbs out of the taillight socket. And that happened once. We were on the expressway taking a trip, and the police flashed and pulled us over and said, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" And I said, "No, I don't know why you pulled us over." I said, "Well, you've got no tail lights, no brake lights, no turn signals, nothing. And I went, oh, I know what's wrong. He goes, "What?" So I go asking if I could get out of the car. Yeah, and we got out of the car, went around to the back of the car, opened the trunk, and stuck the... Yes, yeah, that came through, that you're playing Starfinder now instead of Heroes. I'm talking to Enforcer here. So, okay, so you're going to start the Starfinder. When is that going to get started? Yep. So then I just plugged the lights back in and looked around the back and okay, now you got taillights. So I thanked him. I said, "Thank you very much for pointing that out. I didn't know that they weren't, that this happened." He grumbled about not very smart, and I said, "No, I could think of. It wasn't whether it was smart or not. It was just that there was an old, rusty, half broken down car." So that was one of the things that happened on this car. But you could fix a lot of things. Um, and back then, everything wore out. Oh, today you're going to be going. Okay. You're not sure if the DM will show up. Okay, that's interesting. Well, I hope so. I hope you're able to get the game going. Is this a new group of people? Oh, it's the same group. It's your D&D group. So it's a bunch of people you played with before. Just reading your chats here. Well, hopefully you'll be able to get that game in, and on Monday I'll hear about how it went. Hopefully it'll go okay. I'm just letting this stuff dry here, and they're just sitting there, and then we'll try again, make another effort to get these pieces put together. This metal axle, which I don't know why it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm running late, so maybe not the most reliable person in the world, huh? Okay, I'm going to keep from being impatient. If I start messing with this too soon, the paint's not going to be dry, and then I'll have as I said, when I say messing with it, I mean I would literally end up with a mess. What I am going to do, though, is I'm going to stick these things on an alligator clip. And the reason for that is that the contact cement goes in this little prong here and in this hole. Okay. And I'm just trying to see how these parts fit together again. There, and if I just lay them down, the cement gets on on the surface instead of where it's supposed to be. This gets cement here, here, and all across here. This gets cement here and in this hole. This tiny little bit, I hope this clip can clip it. It doesn't go flying. This tiny bit here cemented there and there. And then these bits that are sitting here, putting them on the wrong sides. Okay, gets cemented across the bottom and in this hole here where the toothpick is. This is the part here that holds most of it. Okay, so this is all ready to be cemented once I feel confident that the paint is dry enough. Yeah, this is going to be quite a thing. Hmm. Okay. This wanders off into the ether, huh? The ethereal ether. Is he a good DM anyway? I mean, when he does show up, is he a, does he do a good job of DMing? But I hope he shows up tonight so you can get that game going. Okay, well that's good then. Anyway, you know, I mean, it's good that when you actually get it going, that it goes well. No, I clearly cannot keep that there. Put those. This that fit in here. Just, you know, it's never ending. Okay, that's a flaw. I don't know if you can see it. There's a shiny spot here where the chrome is showing through. Just, I need to fix that. Just, it's so annoying that I just, no matter what I do, there's always something. There's always something that requires a touching up, usually in a space that can't be avoided. It's like, oh, look, there's a spot. There's another spot. And there's a spot. This isn't where, this is the place where cement is going to go. So I think I can be impatient and go ahead and get the contact cement to put on. Just that was a spot that would be very difficult to touch up later. Thanks for dropping in, and good luck with your game tonight. Look forward to hearing on Monday how it went. I appreciate that. The red is from the Savoya S21. Okay, well, I can't put this off forever, so I'm not going to. I'm going to get going. Um, just start putting the contact cement on here on all these little bits. And like I said, the can says anyway, like the can says, is that no clamps needed. Not over 2 hours. I've got 2 hours from the time I get this on until the time it's not going to work anymore. So that's good. It's good that I've got that amount of time. Like I said, I built this model when it was original, when it first came out in the 1960s. It wasn't even this reissue. It was the real thing. Put it there. That's for the anti-sway bar that goes on later. Tiny little contact points on these things. Can't tell if it's going on there or not. There is. Yeah, I guess there is because there's a little blob. Sorry if we're going silent here. This is one of those moments when I just need to be really paying attention to what I'm doing. Okay. Try to clean up a mess and then make a bigger mess. Yeah. Make sure my fingers are very clean here. Otherwise, I will be touching cement all over everything. So they're supposed to this can sit there for 2 hours, it says, at least 15 minutes. So taking a little bit of time, clean up my hands is a good thing. Yep. I get some tweezers. I might need tweezers to hold these parts because they're so tiny. I don't think I can get them with my fingers. Yeah, let that go for just a couple more minutes while I collect myself and decide, no, it's got to be done, right? I mean, these parts aren't going to put themselves together. So here we start. This goes, didn't get my finger clean. Contact cement on my finger, and if that comes in contact with the contact cement, it very well may just grip. This is where I kind of wish my vision was a little better than it is. I need supervision. If I had any supervision, I wouldn't be in this mess. That's from Super Chicken. If you don't know what Super Chicken is, then you need to go back and look at some of the old YouTubes of this stream. You can become familiar with Super Chicken. This is what I meant about parts needing to like be adjusted on the fly here. So that going in there. know it fits. There we go. See, all these parts just sort of flop around. I'm going to have to do some painting touch up on all of this. I can see that. There. That seems to be attached. Certainly glad that I not follow the directions. I'm seeing this way down there. The anti-sway. Great. This metal axle. This is just a stupid idea. I have no clue about why. What I do know is that before I do the other side, which I need to do fairly. The parts are. They're not falling apart. Okay. Not falling apart right now is a really good thing. And I know now it can be done, so I'll put the contact cement on the other side. But I can just see that, by moving these things around a little bit, how if I had followed the directions and just did one thing at a time and waited for the cement to set, that would have been a real bad thing. So with this. Have to do green paint touch up on that. It's a little streak of. Is it cement that I was able to pull off? Okay, well, let's do the other side. Let's do talk in plurals. Let's talk in plurals. Okay, for a reason. I don't know. And do the same thing there. Get all these bits here that I need later that I don't need now out of the way. But I'm getting it. This great. Put it on the wrong end of the toothpick. Just oozed all over the place. I made a mess, an oozy mess. Not like the gun oozy, but like ooze. It's a big blob of cement sitting there. Oh, that's handy, right? You just use it. Once again, being very happy about the fact that I can take some time and put this on and then spend some time waiting for it to be ready to adhere to itself and not having to like deal with CA glue where it has to go on right away and then it doesn't move once it's put together. To make sure I get this on the right side, it goes on like that. So the cement goes down here. Need to get some in the little holes here. The bulkhead. here. Okay, well, that's all sitting around waiting to be contacty. That's lost now. I'm going to attempt to clean up this mess here. I managed to spill a huge glob of contact cement. Glad, I'm really glad for paper towels. Okay, that's mostly okay. Oh, I need to. What the heck is that? I need to get it off my fingers. Okay, well, I was talking about our 1965 Ford Galaxy, and the carburetor didn't work, and after the engine was rebuilt after it blew up, after it got rebuilt by the high school class. Okay, it ran unreliably. It ran unreliably for many, many years as we fiddled around with the carburetor and never put a manual choke on it. Wasted huge amounts of very uncomfortable time. Getting rid of this. There's a spot there with cement on it that if I don't move it, I know it will be a disaster later. So, yeah, so that. But then the rust started to get to it. And as I said, the floor itself inside the passenger compartment never rusted out so that we could see the road. It never got that bad. As it did for some people. But it wasn't immune. And so the trunk rusted out and we lost our jack. And then I got to talk about, spare tires. I never did finish that. So yeah, cars came with full-sized wheels and tires, just like the other four wheels. And if for some reason there was a flat, you could pull the jack out of the car, find the spot where to jack it up, lift the car up off the ground. Hopefully, one had to be pretty careful about the sequence of events. Seriously, the sequence of events in jacking up a car, because what you did not want to have happen ever, ever, ever. Come on, I test fit this. What you do not want ever, ever, ever to happen was to have the car fall off the jack, especially if the wheel was off, because then you would have like that an unmitigated disaster. Sorry, I need to really kind of focus here again. So here I am getting into my focus mode. Ah, stupid. The alligator clip was great for holding it, but in order to get it off, I had to squeeze it, and by squeezing it, it just went flopping all over the place. Well, there, all the parts are more or less in the place where they need to be. Axle is that just is not help. That is not a good thing. Trying to see if this part here is just not on there right. And I'm going to try to force it to be. There's still a little give in the cement there. That's better. It's much better. Okay, well, you can see that all the parts are more or less attached. I mean, they're attached. They're not falling off. The cement is holding them in place. There's give. Okay, which is a good thing. Just enough give so that I could get them all aligned. And you can begin to imagine what this would have been like. I can imagine anyway, would have been like if I had like just cemented those on and they were at the wrong angle. You know, the rest of the parts just wouldn't have fit. And that would have been it just would have caused all sorts of problems. This way I can make some adjustments to kind of the location of the parts and get them lined up. I need to let this sit now over the weekend. Okay. This cement, this contact cement is supposed to harden and be really like hold really well. It's supposed to anyway. The this part just doesn't fit. Oh, and I've got a flaw. Yeah. Another spot where I managed to scrape the paint a little bit. I'm going to have to do a lot of touching up. Tiny little bits. A lot of tiny little bits of touching up of paint where the paint scraped off of the chrome plating. Not a whole lot of them, but, you know, some. And what's going on here? Really, maybe a touch of green paint needs to go up there. I'll deal with that after this is all set. I don't want to mess with it. Once I get it so that it's aligned nicely, about touching up the paint at some future point. But yeah, there's touching up to do. I got some little dabs of green paint that need to go there. All sorts of little bits of aluminum paint. This is I don't see how the wheels are supposed to attach to that. It's not long enough to go through. It's not long enough to go through the wheels. So that's going to be a thing. Is just getting the wheels to attach to the car. But it is what it is. I mean, you can see. Can't make it any longer. These parts can't fit any differently. But that's an issue for the future. I probably should attach this. Well, there's still some give. No, this bends out. It's soft I mean, it's these little bits go in these little holes, and I can do that after this all sets. Okay, I'm going to play with it just a little bit too much here. Just a little bit too much. But all the parts are. Yes, that's okay. It's better. This one, but it's okay. These parts are okay. These parts are. Right. Yeah, the temptation is to just mess with it too much. So I'm not. I'm going to say the parts are all in place. They're all sticking to each other. They're pretty much lined up okay. The axle goes where it needs to go. I need to put this into the box back here. This is the don't mess with it box. Okay, this is the don't mess with it box until future time. This clamping this worked. Okay, this did work. So this tire will fit on the axle. The other one is sitting there waiting. I've only got 3 clamps, so I can only do one wheel and tire at a time. Okay, let's celebrate this. I'm going to show this to you. The rear suspension is now in place. Okay, the bottom of this is starting to look like it should. I've got one of the 4 wheels clamped and cemented. No, I don't think this is going to work. But that's the thing for the future. I've got a lot of little touching up to do with little spots of paint where the chrome plating is showing through. I'll do that, tiny little dots of paint at a time. On Monday, after this all sets up, I'll be doing some tiny little dots of paint touching up. Be assuming this one works. Not this one, the one that's clamped, assuming the other front wheel has worked, I will clamp one of the rear ones. Okay. And then, I don't know. I know what I'm going to do now. Since I've got this in a box, I'm going to try this. So I don't know if you can see it because it kind of wore off. Okay, is the Firestone supposed to be white? And I've got a little white charcoal pencil that I was able to use to just brush against the top of the raised Firestone logo. But there's okay. In clamping the wheel together, this is bad. Is the tire split? Look at that. There's a split in the tire because of the pressure. Okay, this is what I'm going to do here. I don't know if this will work, but I don't have much of a choice. Is I'm going to use the contact cement inside of that. I'm going to try to get it in there. Push it together. I mean, I can always put it, but it shows on the outside, see? They just don't make these, it wasn't made right. Okay. I don't see any other alternative but to try this. I'm going to bet that this actually happened when I built when I was a kid. There's always something situation. I had to put all that pressure on it in order to get the wheel to work. And in doing so, it split the rubber of the tire. Lovely. Right on the Firestone logo. Yeah. Let that rest for a bit. I'm hoping that this works. I don't know how I'm going to hold it together. Man, oh Manischewitz. I wonder if the others are going to do the same thing. That was an unexpected thing. Just as I was semi-celebrating something going fairly well with the rear suspension, there you go. Don't ever get enthusiastic about something because something else will happen. Sorry, that was just like a shock. I mean, that really was. That was just, I can't believe I'm seeing what I'm seeing. So our 65 Ford Galaxy started rusting. The jack fell out. I don't think it just fell out. It was lost. It fell out on the street. We heard it clatter, 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 clatter. We knew what it was. It was there goes the jack. I hope we don't need to change a tire, which was a thing that we could do back then. Nowadays, you don't even get the miniature sized emergency wheels. If you get a flat, some cars come with what they call a slime kit because it's like a liquid rubber compound that goes through an aerosol can inside the tire and seals whatever the puncture is from the inside temporarily. And the thing about the slime kit is that once you use it, they might not be able to repair the tire because it's been slimed. So the upside is that you can get going, okay, in that it supposedly seals the hole inside the tire and inflates it both at the same time. That's what it does. The downside is that you might have to replace the entire tire because they can't use their standard puncture repair systems once it's been slimed. I mean, sometimes they can. We were actually lucky. One of our cars, the wheel got slimed because it was a slow leak, but they were able to repair it. Okay, this needs to be kept under pressure, and I don't know how I'm going to do that because it's round, so I can't really put a clamp on it. I don't want to sit here and just hold it for the next 3 days. I was happy about one thing working, and then it just made a horrible, horrible, horrible thing here. I mean, really horrible. And it split the tire. It used to be pinched like that. I wonder if it's possible to do that. Fortunately, it's not gripping. Get it where I needed it. I don't know what else would work other than this. I could get epoxy in there. I don't know what to say. I did not expect. No one expects the rubber tire to split because of the pressure that was put on it that was necessary to keep the wheel together. I'm just going to hold this for a while and see what happens. If worst comes to worst, I'll try some other kind of adhesive. This isn't how this is supposed to work. It's supposed to dry on both sides and then come in contact with each other, but the the gap is too small for that. Um, the only other thing that might hold is maybe the Gorilla Glue. Yeah, I mean, I could try the Gorilla Glue if this doesn't work. I hope this doesn't end up being repeated on all three tires. But what happened was because the wheel was compressed on the inside, it just pushed onto the tire from the outside, and it split the rubber. So I might just have a very flawed tire when it comes down to it. No, I just can't keep holding it forever. I'm going to have to let that go and see how it ends up looking on on Monday, and then play with it. I can't do anything more with that. Okay, I have the rear suspension in that box, which I'm putting over there so I don't mess with it. I've got another wheel being compressed, and hopefully the wheel will hold together so that I can be attached, and hopefully the tire won't split. I've got this ready to be attached on Monday after the rear suspension is dry. So this is a problem. I think I'll just mess with this for a while. This is the roll bar, and I attempted to paint it, and it's right on the top of the car, right? Just right there on the top of the car. Everybody can see it, and it's just not right. There's just unevenness in it, and so I'm going to do some sanding on this and attempt to repaint it. So do it on this. I'm using up lots of paper towels today. I'm using this very fine emery cloth to try to smooth out the imperfections that are on here. I don't know if it was the paint or the plastic underneath. But it ended up looking poorly. It's not good. The other problem with this is that there isn't any place to hold it to paint it. Okay, there's these bits here go into holes. And I suppose I could pull that out. I don't know why it's in there. Did that without breaking anything. That's good. These go in. They go almost, but good. Good grief. Here I am. Let's test fit this, right? This is supposed to go here and here. Yeah, it just barely fits. Be another one of those challenges. Actually, this is kind of polishing the paint. It looks better this way than it did with the raw paint. So that's an idea, to put some several layers of paint on here and then polish it with the very fine emery cloth, because it actually does improve the look of it quite significantly. Huh. I hadn't thought of that. You can see that there's a ridge here where the paint came off completely, and that was just a flaw in the plastic. And I've got the same sort of issue here. So I need to paint this. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. I'm going to clip the bottom of one of these here to hold it. I'm going to paint everything except the little bits on the bottom on both sides, and then I'll touch those up later. I don't know if that's going to work or not. Whatever it is, what I'm doing now isn't working, so painting one side, flipping it over, and painting the other just isn't a good idea. It is just not. It's not going to work in terms of getting the paint even, because flipping it over, there'll be a ridge between the two layers of paint. I mean, if worse comes to worse, I can just keep taking the paint off and putting it on until it looks good. Why not? That could happen. What are we doing on time here? It's noon. Okay, I got about an hour. Well, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to mess with this a little bit. And I'm actually going to use a shade of this paint that I haven't used before. Just to test it. It is called Chrome. Okay, and I said none of this was chromed, but I want this to look kind of shiny. So I haven't used this. And if it works, fine. If not, then I'll sand it off again, right? And I don't need this part anymore. You know, now that I'm thinking back at it, that tire split, I think that actually happened on the models that I built when I was young. I think the same thing happened, is that the rubber split on the tire when the wheels were put in. Just, you know, one thing or the other. Either the wheels don't make contact in the center of the tire, in which case they don't fit on the model, or you have to push them so hard that it splits the rubber, and then the tire is broken. In fact, if I remember correctly, it split all the way around and the tire just opened up. You know, it just cracked. Well, give this a try. I said this is a low risk sort of thing. I want to see how this paint looks compared to, say, the aluminum. No, I've used it before. I'm guessing it isn't going to look terribly much different, but that's just a guess. after I'm done painting this little bit, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to get more parts out. I'm going to just work on these. These will end up being painted green. They're two parts that came together. They have this big seam along them. What I'm going to be doing is sanding down the seam and taking the chrome plating off of most of this, so that hopefully the primer and the green coat at the end will adhere. This will probably take 2 coats. And I can put the second coat on. Probably yet during this stream. This should dry, in about a half hour. Enough so that I can paint it again. The main event for the day, the assembly of the rear suspension, happened. And that did seem to work. The unanticipated, I can't believe this is terrible, splitting of the tire on the wheel that did work. So there was a, yay, it worked situation where the front wheel did, after being clamped for 2 days, did hold together, but it split the wheel in the meantime. That was unanticipated and unwelcome. Here, you can watch paint dry. I put some contact cement in and held it together, and I just couldn't keep holding it. So it's either going to hold or not. And if it doesn't hold, then I will make an effort to try something else, so that I don't have a broken tire on the front of the car. Okay. So bits that yet need to be done, quite a lot. There's all sorts of, it's getting to the point where I need to be painting these parts and getting the stripe put on them. So just to let you know, there's a yellow stripe that goes around the front of the, well, here, I'll just show it to you. There, yellow stripe all the way across, around the nose and on the back. This also shows you the seat the way it's supposed to be, the way it is in fact molded into this part of the vehicle, correctly molded in and incorrectly done in the model. And I've made some modifications to make it look pretty close to that. So this yellow stripe needs to go across, and after testing, what I found is that the yellow needs to be painted on first and then masked over, and then the green over painted, because the yellow doesn't cover the green and the green covers the yellow. There's just that. Okay. So what I'll be doing is testing it on this, because if it goes badly, it's the kind of part where I can clean the paint off pretty easily. Okay. Once this is done, cleaning this up would be really difficult. So I'm going to paint this yellow and then get the right tape. It needs to be like 1/4 inch, 6 millimeters. The place that makes this tape also makes a 6mm tape, which would be just the right width, a little tiny 0.3 of a millimeter too small. Okay, but that's not going to really be noticeable. 0.3 of a millimeter, less than half of a millimeter, and the width of the stripe won't be a real visible thing. But I want a single piece of tape so that I can get a nice straight line with both sides, both edges lined up correctly, that kind of thing. So I need to tape the inside of this so that I can paint it all yellow, and then I will get the correct tape and tape it across, and then paint it green, and then take the tape off, and hopefully there'll be a nice stripe there. But I need to get the tape. So until I do that, there's no real rush to get this part done. These go on at the very end, but it's one of those things that just needs to be done. And it doesn't do it itself. So here goes sanding, just cleaning it up. It's just messy. I'm going to start with, I think I want to start with the 600 grit and see how that goes. I don't like using the coarser grits if I can avoid it, because they leave scratches, and the scratches need to be polished out, and that's always a chore. I wonder what, this is 1500. I'm just checking to see if I've got any 600 that's still usable, or whether I just need to cut more. Yeah. I'm getting quite a pile of trash over there. Yeah, that's not usable. And at some point, it's okay. I'll just get a new piece of sandpaper. This is the 600. Well, okay. I just have to say that this has been a roller coaster of a stream today. It was, did need to do some touch up. That was kind of a pain. Get the rear suspension assembled. That was, yeah, this worked. It's okay. It looks all right. And then thinking about, testing the yellow stripe. That's what I was going to do. I never even got around to telling you what I was trying to do. There's a yellow stripe on the tire. It's supposed to be, and there's actually a raised ridge around the rubber tire that comes with the model where the yellow stripe is supposed to go, and I got a piece of yellow chalk that I was going to attempt to test. Okay. And then I saw that the tire was cracked. And at that point, all of the joy was sucked out of the stream and turned into a pit of despair, because I made an effort to repair the crack in the tire that may or may not be successful. The others might will probably do the same. I just don't know. There was that. But now, once again, going back to sanding out seams so that the seams don't show. And at the same time, getting rid of the chrome plating. Now you can see what's happening here is this is sanded down and this isn't. It's because the two parts are not in perfect alignment. And then there's a ridge across the middle where it was cemented together. But getting rid of the seams was pretty successful on the nose of the Lotus, which I could show to you again. It's in the box over there. And maybe it'll be successful here too. Won't really be able to tell until it's primed. And even then sometimes it's not evident whether or not the seam has totally disappeared. It looks okay right now, actually. The model cement that I use, it doesn't dissolve the plastic as aggressively as the tube cement did back in the 60s. Yeah, not the 1860s. It was still the 1960s. It wasn't that old. Although sometimes it feels like it. But it still melts it. It still dissolves it a little bit, creating like a weld. And what's supposed to happen, in theory, at least according to the modeling books, is that it fills the gap. And then when you sand it down, the gap disappears. The seam disappears. It looks like there's a little bit showing here. And what will have to happen is if little bits of the seam still show, those get filled in with a filler material, a plastic filler material. So I can't sand this down all the way. There's little rivets along here. And I don't want to lose those. I'm going to sand down close to them and then feather that. But I want to get as much of the chrome off as I can because the chrome gets in the way of everything. It keeps the paint from adhering. It keeps the cement from adhering. If the paint doesn't adhere, what ends up happening is that, like on the suspension parts where I didn't get all the chrome off because just the way the parts are, is that then there has to be all this little touch up on top of the little bits of chrome that peek through. This is fairly coarse sandpaper. But I'm using it because it goes quickly. And then I'm going to polish all of this with this emery cloth here before I prime it. And if I get these done, I might. If I get these sanded down and polished, I might just go ahead and prime them over the weekend. Why not? Why not prime them over the weekend? And then after they're primed, then I can see if more work yet needs to be done on them. And if it does, I can do that on Monday too. As I shed tears about the split in the tire. I continue to wonder about what I can do to fix it. Probably, if I had some CA, I could try that. I don't know if the CA would actually adhere to the rubber or not. But if it did, it would grip it right away. I know they make it kind of a gel-like. I have to go to the hobby store anyway to see if they've got the 6mm tape that I need for... Well, I hope I can find that. I just dropped it. To see if they've got the right width of tape that I need. If they do, then I'll have it. If they don't, then I'll have to mail order it, and that'll take a week to get here. Yeah, the very front of this is where the sprue was attached. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to get this cleaned up. Yeah, the rest of it all kind of fit together, but right here it doesn't fit. A lot of sanding. I can feel the gap there, and I don't want that on the front. Things show in the front, right? And so you look at it from the front. So this especially needs to be sanded down so that there's nothing showing. Well, this was one of those days where, oh, that went okay. Oh no, what a disaster. I don't know what to do if I can't fix that tire crack. Maybe what I suppose, well, there's always something, right? I can get some rubberized caulk. In fact, I might have some, like a silicone caulk, black, and just use that to fill the gap. I'll just say that if it comes to that. I mean, pretty much the aim is to not have a crack showing in the tire. Is if I can't get it to be held together by an adhesive, is to fill it in with something that comes close to matching. Okay, well, at least I've got a plan C now. Plans A, B, and C. A is hopefully this contact cement thing that I tried will actually end up working. And then when I look at it on Monday, I'll say, that's okay. It's okay the way it is. Plan B is to try another adhesive, maybe CA. Gorilla Glue sets way too slowly. It needs to be something fast, because like you saw, I couldn't just keep holding it forever. Plan C is to fill it in with a similar material. So yay, I've got many plans. I have all sorts of plans to fix the crack in the tire. Because there's always something. Right there. There's this little nichey thing there. Ooh, I almost grabbed the file. That would have been a not good idea, really. I would have had scratches all over the front of this, especially in a spot that was hard to fix. Okay, this is going slowly enough that I can say there's a 50-50 chance I am not going to finish this before the stream ends. And it's the kind of thing I could mess around with over the weekend, but I'm not going to. These parts don't get onto the vehicle until right near the end. There's no real rush to get it done, but it's a good way to kind of finish up the stream today, especially with the tire disaster. So let's get back to the 65 Ford Galaxy. Okay. Talked about the carburetor, now we're ever working. Talked about the rusting issue, talked about the jack, got to talk about spare tires and how that's changed over time. I didn't ever really finish talking about that. There's more to be said. The need to change a tire, it doesn't happen as much as it used to. It's another one of those used to be's. It was tires just went down. In fact, let me talk about tire technology. I'm now old enough that I can talk about significant changes in tires that we don't even think about anymore. Okay. So, for example, I think this is still true of bicycle tires, or at least some of them, is that there was the tire, but the tire didn't inflate. No, there was a tube inside the tire called an inner tube. Most people now, if they have any knowledge of what an inner tube might be, would be from a water park. Really, where you go tubing. Okay, there's these inflated donuts. Well, it used to be that the tire, between the tire would still attach to the rim like it does now with a kind of a bead of rubber. Okay, you know how that goes. Probably not. Well, the tire's attached to the wheels pretty much as they do now, but you didn't inflate the tire. There was inside of the tire, between the tire and the wheel, was this rubber inner tube, which is just like the ones that you use for the lazy river or some of the water slides, the tube that you use for tubing. That's where they came from. Originally, when you went tubing, you were using the tubes that were used inside of tires to keep them inflated. And so if a tire went flat, it wasn't the tire. The tire was, unless you had like really damaged the tire, the thing that needed to be patched. And you could patch these inner tubes, and there were kits to do that. You could get the jack out. Talked about that. You'd have a jack, take the wheel off, somehow get the tire off the wheel, which was a dangerous thing to do and difficult. And if you could find where the hole was, where the puncture was in the inner tube, or you could take it into a car repair place, you know, where they'd have the equipment to do that. You could find it and patch it with an adhesive rubber patch. It's different than the patch you put into tires now, but yeah, you could patch the inner tube. And then a big innovation came out, and people didn't, I have to say, in general, didn't really trust this. The tubeless tire. And instead of there being an inner tube that kept the tire inflated, the seal between the tire and the rim of the wheel was supposed to be tight enough that it would hold the air. And then you didn't need an inner tube because you inflated the tire itself, which is what we have now. But that isn't how it used to be. It used to be that there was a tube inside the tire, and then they had to go out of their way to give it a name, tubeless tire, because there wasn't any tube. Pretty clever, huh? Naming it what it is. But yeah, so that was, I remember that happening. You know, going, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm not sure I can trust that. I'm not sure that the bead of the tire, the rubber ridge on the tire, is going to seal against the wheel set in a way that'll keep the air in. And in fact, there were problems with that. If there was a little rust, and it was, we call it corrosion more generically, but it was rust because the wheels were just steel wheels, unlike the aluminum and magnesium and other composites that wheels are made of. Now you hardly ever just get plain old steel wheels. But yeah, the steel wheels would rust. There would be little bits of rust on them. And if there was, then the bead of the tire didn't sit, and the air would leak out. So, you get a tubeless tire, and you'd have to be checking your air pressure more frequently than you would have maybe with the tube tire, at least initially, until the technology of the tire and especially the wheels changed. This actually was a problem with some of the first alloy wheels, non-steel wheels. I had a car that, I'll digress a little bit since I'm talking about tubeless tires now, is, it had these fancy alloy wheels instead of the plain old steel wheels. That's why you had hubcaps, by the way, to cover up the steel wheels and make them look fancy. That's another whole story I talk about. You don't have hubcaps anymore because the wheels themselves are the fancy bit. But yeah, so this car I had these alloy wheels, and they were real fancy, and they didn't need hubcaps to look fancy and all that. But in the winter, when the temperature changed, the tire didn't sit on it, and it leaked, and the tires went flat. Just sitting there in the parking lot, flat tires, because of a little bit of corrosion. I think that was around the rim of the tire from the road salt. They've fixed that now, pretty much. You don't have that problem, but this car really, really did have significant issues. Can't tell which way. Just higher on one side than the other. So yes, there. Tubeless tires. That was an innovation. Think about that, because now nobody has inner tubes anymore, except maybe on bicycle tires, kind of thing. But it used to be that's how all the tires were. I think there's just. I'm going to use some 400 on this just to see what's going on. Right on the end. That part will show. This faces forward. That's the air intake. Okay. And the edge of that is actually supposed to be metal. It's not painted green. So I'll have to mess around with that when the time comes. That seems to be working. Now that was one major innovation. It was the tubeless tire. Ta-da! Tubeless tire. And then instead of, at water parks, being able to just go to the auto store and getting used tubes, they had to make tubes just for tubing. Whereas previously they were just tubes where they were just there, because they were all over the place for tires. So the next major innovation, well, there were lots of innovations. One was the going from tube to tubeless. There were minor innovations like the tread designs. They got better and better. at pushing water out of the way. Hydroplaning is still a significant issue. If you drive into water, even a thin layer of water on the road, it can lift your car up off the road. It's called hydroplaning. So instead of you being in contact with the road, you're in contact with this little bit of water that makes your car float above the road, and then you go skidding all over the place. So pushing water out of the way in tread design was a big deal. There used to be commercials about that, where they would show it, they're rolling over a pane of glass, basically, that was covered with water, so you could see the tire pushing the water out of the way, and the rubber of the tire was making contact with the glass, so that it, stuck to the road. The tread designs were a big deal, especially when they started making them that pushed the water out of the way and kept your car on the road when it was wet. But other than tubeless tires, which we eventually, at some point there wasn't a choice whether you trusted them or not. You got tubeless tires when you bought wheels and tires. It just became the standard. Was radial ply. You don't even hear nowadays that they're radial tires because they're all radial tires. But the way the inside of your tire, it's not just solid rubber. There's a bunch of sometimes metal and different fabrics and so on that hold the tire in shape and control its wear, that sort of thing. But all tires are belted on the inside, and what that means is that it used to be a fabric like nylon or one of the plastics. The plies of the blanket, the belts would go from side to side. Okay. And sometimes they would be straight, and then they call them, and then to make it stronger, they would do bias ply, which would still go from side to side. I'd show you on the broken tire that I've got, but I don't want to reach it here. So assume this is a tire. The belts would go like this, from side to side. Okay. And a bias ply would go kind of at an angle, and then the next one would go at an angle across. So it'd be like that, and then like that, and like that, and like that. And that made it stronger. But then radial ply tires came out, and this was a big deal too. I remember they'd show pictures of it in the papers. There'd be an insert in the paper about what is this radial tire thing. And instead of the belts going like this across this way, or even like that, they went like this. They were radial. They went wrapped around the tire that way. And they had to have an article about it and show pictures, because when you had a radial tire as opposed to a bias ply tire, the tire looked half flat, because the belts that went this way supported the side of the tire more than belts that went this way. And so I remember reading the articles, is if you get one of these, this is what it looks like inside and why it's called radial. It went on with this like 2-page explanation with all sorts of illustrations and things. You might laugh at that, but it was like another one of these. This is a change I'm not sure I can trust because it makes it look like the tires are flat. They said, well, it's going to look like your tire is going flat, but it's not. It's the way it's supposed to be. So these radial ply tires came out, and they were originally, like for sports cars, they were an expensive, fairly expensive option until they eventually became, like tubeless tires, they became the standard for all tires. And I'm not going to be able to see if this is if the seams are completely gone or not until after this is primed, because the seam is just, the part that's welded between the two halves is a slightly different color. So even though I can't feel it, it might still be visible. Well, one of these is ready for priming. And clearly I'm not going to get this other one done. There's no time to get it done, so I'm not going to. Save that for Monday. So yeah, these radial ply tires came out, and once again, it was, like I said, there was like this 2-page supplement complete with explanations and renderings of the inside of the tire and comparing the two and looking at how the sidewall bulged out. We all looked at it and marveled at it because of this innovation. We had to celebrate these innovations back then. So that's about tire giant. That's my digression about tires. But to get back to the 65 Ford Galaxy, so this thing was rusting out and the jack fell out of that's how this all started, right? Talking about jacks and using a jack to repair the tire and how tire technology changed over time. And we had to get used to major things like losing our inner tubes and running with half-flat tires because they were radials. Yeah. But eventually, the car rusted out so much, and it became pretty unreliable because of the bits of the carburetor that didn't work and never did. We decided it was time to get rid of it. We bought another used vehicle. And that's another story. But we bought another used vehicle and sold it for junk. And this was back in, when would it have been? Probably the mid-70s. I think the car had, it was now 10 years old, 10 or 11. And by then, every car on the road had been rusted out, as this one had. I think we got $50 for it, which is like almost $400 now. For a junker car, even now, you sometimes don't get much more than $50 for them. So the guy came with his tow truck and looked at it and said, "Oh, this will be fun. I think I'm going to run it in the Derby." And I'm going, "Huh?" "Yeah, the demo Derby. I think I'm going to run it in the demo Derby," because the body was shot. What he was mainly interested in was like the drivetrain, like the engine that never worked and the transmission and stuff. So he hooked it up and we gave him our phone number so that he could call us because we wanted to go see it. We would definitely wanted to see this car run in the demo Derby. Well, it wasn't very long after he left that he called back and said, "I'm not going to be able to run your car in the Derby." And we immediately just freaked. And it wasn't that we were sad because we weren't going to see it in the demo derby. It was like, oh my God, he's going to give it back to us and want his money back. He said, oh no. And he said, no. I already sold the engine. That's not the problem. The thing is, I was hauling it down the road and it broke in half. We didn't know this when we sold it, but the frame was so rusted that when it was up on the tow truck, it just cracked in the middle. And he was able to haul it the rest of the way back, scraping along the ground, I guess. But yeah, if we had kept the car much longer, we could have found ourselves. I don't know what it's like. I can't believe it's a very pleasant thing to be inside of a car that has cracked in half. Hopefully, I think it cracked behind the driver's seat. But if there have been passengers in the car, it could have cracked right under their feet, right between the front and the rear seats. So there's the story of with the 65 Ford Galaxy. I used up a bunch of this. Okay, on Monday, I'm going to see what happened to the cracked tire. I'll be unclamping this to see if the wheel did what it needed to do, which would be to hold together, and whether or not that tire cracked as well. If the tire crack is still present, I'll just here let you look at something while I'm talking. If the cracked in the tire was not held together by the contact cement that I tried to put on there, I'll attempt to clean it out and find another thing. And if worse comes to worse, I will look for some black caulk and silicone caulk and try to fill it in, just so that it doesn't have a visible crack. So on Monday, I'm going to be fiddling around with lots of little stuff. I'll be cleaning up the other air intake cover so it looks closer than this. Okay. Get this other one done. And since I'll be priming those, what I'll probably do is pull more chrome parts off of the sprue and get those prepped for priming. I'll just get as much of those as I can. I will try to finish this. I was going to put a second coat on here, but I'm not going. No, I don't know. Is that paint's? No, the paint's dried out in the well. I'll finish this. On Monday, I'll either be celebrating the salvaging of the broken tire or just being frustrated by that and hoping I don't break any more. I will be, assuming this works, I'll be clamping one of the rear tires because those have to go through the same process. And more likely than not, I'll tape the inside of this so that I can paint it yellow, so that I can tape it and paint a stripe on it. This is getting to the point where progress might be kind of haphazard, where I can't get that much done in one stream because I have to wait for something else, which is kind of going to be the case until I get these stripes painted, get all the finishing bits on this. Yeah. I mean, it's not like there aren't a whole lot of little bits that need a lot of work. There's the filler caps. There's that. There's the injection tubes. Each one of those is a separate piece. Those are the kinds of things that will likely end up on the floor. There's the mounting of the radius rods. In the back here, the windshield, the mirrors are a mess. Those are going to be a problem. But you can just see there's a whole lot of the spinners and the knockoff spinners, a whole lot of tiny little chrome-plated parts that need to be sanded down so that they can be appropriately painted. Things I keep forgetting, like painting the back of the exhaust, putting little dots of black paint in there. In fact, what I should do, if I can find it, where it went, what black paint I need. Well, one more thing that's annoying is I've got like 4 different, there it is. Yeah, the flat black. I'm gonna put this here. And then on Monday I'll say, why did I put that there? And it'll be, oh yeah, I went through all the trouble to carve out exhaust ports on the back of the exhaust instead of having them just flat and be yellow, so I could put some flat black paint in there to make it look like they're exhausts. So I might remember why I put this black paint here on Monday. Thanks, everybody. On one hand, it went pretty well. I got this whole rear suspension assembly put together. It hasn't fallen apart. It's in the box over there that I'm not going to touch. I'm just not. It's near the end of the stream. Bad things happen. This is done. Yay, celebrate. On Monday, I'll attach the anti-sway bar to the backs of these. I know that will fit because I can bend this enough to get those into the tiny little holes. I'm going to continue working on the wheels and the tires. As you saw today, there was a disaster with one of the tires that I need to figure out what to do. And maybe over the weekend, I'll get to the hobby store. And if I'm real lucky, they'll have the 6 millimeter wide, 1/4 inch, 6 millimeter wide tape that I need to tape for the stripe. And then I can start working on that on the body. And if I can get the stripe on the car, it'll be close, to just having to put little bits of things together. But these little bits of things, like the mirrors are really awful. They're really a mess because the mirror part has a divot in them that needs to be filled in. I'm going to be spending a lot of time on Monday and Wednesday next week just messing around with little bits of parts. Just little bits of parts to try to get them looking and be usable, basically. What can I say? I'll be messing around with little bits of parts trying to make them usable. And it'll take a lot of time. It'll be more of, I got hardly anything done, but took a long time to do it. That's become my catchphrase. Everybody needs a catchphrase. That's mine. And I would show you what I accomplished today, but I don't want to even mess with that box. I don't want to take a chance disturbing it while the cement is sitting. So I'll see you again on Monday. Have a decent weekend. I hope you do. I hope you have a pleasant weekend. I'll be coming back and, trying to figure out what to do about the tires. That's it. Okay. I ran out of things to say. Time is up. I'll see you on Monday.